Alaska, one of the most remote and mysterious regions on the planet, holds secrets that science has yet to explain. From ancient petroglyphs with unknown meanings to submerged ruins that defy conventional timelines, these are not myths invented for stories. These are real anomalies that researchers continue to puzzle over. Evidence that challenges everything we think we know about human settlement in the Americas and hints at a past far stranger than we've been taught. Before we dive into it, here's a quick note. The visuals in this video aren't necessary to enjoy the stories. They add depth, but you can follow along just through the audio. Feel free to let this play in the background while you work, relax, or even fall asleep to these perplexing mysteries. And if you'd like to support me making these videos, consider subscribing to the channel. Let's begin our journey into the unsolved ancient mysteries of Alaska. In the quiet, permafrost-preserved soil of a long-abandoned Yupik village near the modern town of Kodiak, Alaska, archaeologists made a discovery that would send ripples through the understanding of North American prehistory. This site, known as Nunalleq, or the Old Village, was a thriving community for centuries before European contact. But it wasn't the expertly crafted harpoons, the intricate masks, or the well-preserved tools that posed the biggest mystery. It was something far more fragile and infinitely more puzzling. A collection of carefully folded birch bark scrolls, covered in a complex and utterly unique form of notation. These were not simple drawings or random scratches. The scrolls revealed a sophisticated system of dots, lines, and geometric patterns, meticulously arranged in rows and columns. To the trained eye, they bore a striking resemblance to formal symbolic notation, something you might expect from an advanced ancient culture with a written language. But that's the heart of the mystery. This is pre-contact Alaska, a time and place where history as we know it was solely oral. There was no alphabet, no known writing system, nothing that should have produced such an elaborate and deliberate form of record-keeping. The immediate question is obvious. What do these symbols mean? Were they a form of storytelling, a way to map out complex genealogies or mythologies on a portable medium? Could they have been practical instructions, a shaman's guide to rituals, or a hunter's annotated map of migratory patterns and tidal cycles? Some researchers have even speculated they could represent an early mathematical system used for tracking trade, lunar cycles, or the passage of time itself. The patterns are too ordered to be dismissed as mere doodles. They feel intentional, like a code waiting to be cracked. But the mystery only deepens from there. If this system was so advanced, why did it vanish? The archaeological record at Nunalleq and other contemporary sites shows no evolution of this technology, no earlier, cruder prototypes, and no later, more refined versions. It appears in the archaeological layers almost fully formed, and then, just as suddenly, it disappears. The site of Nunalleq itself was attacked and burned in a period of warfare known as the Bow and Arrow Wars, around the mid-17th century. Was this knowledge so specialized, held by so few, that it was lost in that single catastrophic event? Did the social upheaval and violence of that era simply erase the need for, or the people who understood, this complex notation? There is another, more intriguing possibility. Perhaps the birch bark scrolls were not meant to be a permanent written language at all, but something more ephemeral. Some anthropologists suggest they could have been mnemonic devices, physical aids for memory. A village elder holding a scroll might trace the patterns with a finger, each dot and line triggering the recall of a specific story, a song, or a piece of ancestral law. In an oral culture, memory is the library. If these scrolls were the index to that library, their true meaning would have resided not in the symbols themselves, but in the mind of the person holding them. When that person was gone, the code became permanently locked, the key lost to time. This theory would explain why the practice seems to have vanished without a trace. The knowledge wasn't stored on the birch bark, it was stored in people. The scrolls were merely the trigger. Once the generations that knew how to read them passed away, the physical objects became beautiful, but utterly silent artifacts. They represent a peak of intellectual sophistication that we can see but cannot comprehend, a silent testament to an advanced form of thinking that flourished in the Alaskan wilderness, and then, like so many fragile things, was swept away by the winds of change and conflict. The scrolls challenge our very definition of writing and history, asking us to consider that a culture can be highly advanced, can develop complex systems of notation, without ever feeling the need to write a single word. Now, let's turn from a mystery of symbols to a mystery of scale. Across the oral histories of the indigenous Tlingit and other coastal peoples of Alaska and the Pacific Northwest, there echoes a legend, a story of a place of immense wealth and power, a neutral trading hub where nations gathered not in conflict, but in commerce. This place was known by the value of its most prized commodity, the legendary northern copper's Megasite. The copper itself was a form of great wealth. These were not coins, but large, shield-like plates of nearly pure, native copper, pounded into form and often inscribed with the crests and histories of powerful families. They were items of immense prestige, used in potlatches to display wealth, settle debts, and forge alliances. But the copper had to come from somewhere. The legends speak of a specific, almost mythical location, a primary source where this material was not only mined and worked on an industrial scale, but also traded in a great, multicultural marketplace. This wasn't just a small village with a mine. Oral histories describe a vast seasonal gathering, a bustling metropole of the ancient world. Imagine a natural harbor filled with umiaks and canoes from different cultures, beaches lined with temporary longhouses, and the constant sound of hammers shaping raw copper into prized ingots and plaques. It was a place where the Tlingit, Ayak, Haida, and perhaps even cultures from far inland would meet under an understood truce to exchange not only copper, but also obsidian, jade, furs, and exotic goods from across the continent. It was the economic heart of the North Pacific coast, a nexus of trade and culture. And then it vanished. The great gathering ceased. The location was lost, fading from practical knowledge into the realm of legend. The question that has baffled historians and archaeologists for decades is a simple one. Where was it? If it was so large, so central to the economy of an entire region, where is the physical evidence? The sheer volume of trade and manufacturing should have left an archaeological signature that is impossible to miss. A mountain of workshop debris, vast quarry pits, the remains of hundreds of hearths and temporary structures. Yet, no such site has ever been conclusively identified. Several theories attempt to solve this geographical puzzle. Some researchers point to the Copper River region, known for its deposits of native copper. Others suggest locations along the lost coast of Alaska, areas that may have been submerged or drastically altered by seismic activity and rising sea levels since the last ice age. This is a compelling idea. The coastline of Alaska is geologically dynamic. What was once a sheltered bay perfect for a trading hub could have been sunk by an earthquake or scoured by a tsunami, wiping the Megasite from the map and burying its remains under meters of silt and water. Another theory is that the Megasite was never a single, fixed location, but a concept that moved. Perhaps the gathering shifted from one suitable bay to another over the centuries, following social or environmental pressures. This would scatter the archaeological evidence, making it look like a series of smaller, seasonal camps rather than one colossal city. Or perhaps the site does exist, but is hidden in plain sight, waiting to be recognized amongst the many archaeological sites in the region that have yet to be fully excavated. The most haunting possibility is that the site's disappearance was deliberate. The northern copper's Megasite represented immense concentrated wealth. Its decline could have been triggered by a catastrophic war, a fight over the source of power itself that was so destructive it shattered the tradition of the neutral trading ground forever. Or the introduction of European metals through early trade may have suddenly devalued the native copper, causing the entire economic system that supported the Megasite to collapse overnight. The reason it vanished without a trace might be because it was abandoned, its purpose gone, and the forest simply grew back over the forge pits and meeting grounds, guarding the secret of its location. The lost northern copper's Megasite remains the ghost of a golden age, a place of immense power and community known only through stories, challenging us to wonder if the greatest center of commerce and culture in ancient Alaska is still out there, waiting silently beneath the moss and trees for someone to find it. On a remote, windswept spit of land jutting into the Chukchi Sea in Point Hope, Alaska, lie the remains of a culture that defies every expectation. This is the site of Ipiutak, a sprawling settlement discovered in 1939, containing over 600 house mounds and a long, eerie avenue of burial mounds. But it isn't the size of the site that is so perplexing. It is the stunning artistry of its people and the profound mystery of their complete and utter disappearance. The Ipiutak people were master carvers, creating some of the most intricate and beautiful artifacts ever found in the Arctic. Working primarily with walrus ivory, they produced harpoon heads so finely detailed they could be considered jewelry, elaborate snow goggles, and small, mysterious objects whose purpose we can only guess at. But their most famous creations are their openwork carvings and grave offerings. These include intricate human and animal figurines, but most notably, a series of complex and sometimes frightening masks and face carvings. These faces are often skeletal or surreal, with swirling, concentric circle eyes, gaping mouths, and designs that seem to hint at a deep and complex spiritual world. The level of detail is astonishing, achieved with nothing more than stone tools and incredible patience. The mystery of Ipiutak is not just who they were, but where they came from and where they went. Radiocarbon dating places them at their peak between roughly 1,500 and 1,000 years ago, but their art style is unlike anything else in the Arctic. It shows a startling similarity to the art of the Scythians, ancient nomadic peoples from the Siberian steppes, thousands of miles away. This has led to a compelling and controversial theory. Were the Ipiutak people migrants from Siberia, a band of highly skilled artists and hunters who crossed the Bering Strait and established a new life in Alaska, bringing their unique artistic traditions with them? Their way of life adds another layer to the puzzle. Evidence suggests they were primarily a marine hunting culture, relying on seals, walrus, and whales. But there is a curious absence at the site. Very few signs of whaling on a large scale, which was the cornerstone of later Arctic cultures like the Thule, who would come to dominate the region. The Ipiutak people seemed to thrive on a different model, one that was incredibly sophisticated but perhaps more fragile. And then they vanished. By around 1,000 years ago, the site of Ipiutak was completely abandoned. There is no evidence of a massive invasion, no layer of ash from a catastrophic volcanic eruption, and no mass graves to suggest a terrible plague. It seems as if they simply left, or they were assimilated, or they died out. But why would such a successful and artistically advanced culture simply cease to exist? Several theories attempt to explain this disappearance. One points to climate change. A shift to a colder period, perhaps a mini ice age, could have altered sea ice patterns and migration routes of the marine mammals they depended on, pushing their survival to the brink. Another theory suggests conflict. Were they eventually overwhelmed by the ancestors of the modern Inuit people, the Thule, who were expanding eastward with their superior whaling technology? If so, why is there no clear evidence of a battle? The most haunting theory is that their sophistication was their downfall. Their intricate art and complex spiritual beliefs may have required a stable, abundant life. A few bad seasons of hunting, a change in the climate, or social upheaval could have disrupted the delicate balance that allowed their artists to flourish. Their culture, for all its beauty, may have been exceptionally fragile. The people of Ipiutak leave behind no descendants that we can clearly identify, only their breathtaking carvings. They stand as a ghost culture, a reminder that even the most advanced and artistic societies can be vulnerable, disappearing into the silence of the tundra, leaving behind only beautiful, skeletal faces to stare back at us across the centuries, keeping their secrets forever. In the year 1957, archaeologists were excavating a prehistoric Inuit house mound at the site of Espenberg, on the northwest coast of Alaska. It was a site dating back to the late pre-contact period, a time long before European explorers like Vitus Bering or James Cook ever sailed these waters. As they sifted through the soil, they found the usual artifacts: stone blades, caribou bone, and ivory tools. Then they found something that should not have been there, something impossible. A small, weathered coin. After careful cleaning and analysis, the object was identified. It was a Norse penny, a silver coin minted in Norway during the reign of King Olaf Kyrre, sometime between 1066 and 1080. This single, tiny object ignited a firestorm of controversy that continues to burn today. How did a medieval Norse coin from over 5,000 miles away end up buried in an ancient Inuit site in Alaska? The immediate and most thrilling theory connects directly to the Viking sagas. We know the Norse, led by Leif Erikson, established a settlement at Elands Aux Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada, around the year 1000. This proves they had the ship technology to reach North America, which they called Vinland, nearly 500 years before Columbus. The sagas speak of their explorations further south, but could they have also ventured north and west? Could a party of Norse explorers, or perhaps a single storm-blown Norse ship, have sailed up the coast, making contact with the ancestors of the Inuit in Alaska? This coin could be proof of that first, fleeting contact, a tangible piece of evidence left behind from a meeting of two worlds that history forgot. But a mystery this enticing demands skepticism. The main question is one of provenance. How can we be sure the coin was truly embedded in a pre-Columbian layer? Could it have been accidentally mixed in by the archaeologists themselves? The original excavators were highly respected and maintained that the context was secure, that the house mound was undisturbed. Yet, the possibility of contamination, however small, always exists. Could an Inuit traveler in the 19th century, who had acquired the coin through trade with Russian or American whalers, have simply lost it centuries later on top of the old ruin? It's possible, though the excavators argued strongly against it. Another theory involves the vast and ancient trade networks that crisscrossed native North America. Objects could travel incredible distances through hand-to-hand trade, often far exceeding the distance any single person would journey. A Norse coin, perhaps left behind in Newfoundland or Labrador, could have been picked up by indigenous people there. Over generations, it could have been traded northward, moving from group to group as a curious trinket, a piece of exotic raw material, or an item of spiritual significance. It could have taken centuries for it to travel from the Atlantic coast to the shores of the Bering Sea, finally being lost or discarded by an Inuit hunter who had no concept of what it truly was or where it had originally come from. This theory, while less romantic than direct Viking contact, is perhaps more plausible. It turns the coin from a piece of evidence for exploration into a testament to the incredible reach and complexity of ancient native trade routes. The coin didn't need a Norse ship to reach Alaska. It could have traveled in a sealskin bag, passed through countless hands, a silent witness to a network that connected the continent. To this day, the Norse penny remains an enigma. It is the only pre-Columbian Norse artifact ever found in Alaska. It is either the most important archaeological find in North America, rewriting the history of transoceanic contact, or it is a fascinating historical anomaly, a single coin that embarked on an unimaginable journey of its own. It sits in a museum drawer, a small silver circle of metal that holds within it the ghost of a possibility, a question that may never be definitively answered. Did the Norse and the Inuit ever truly meet? Or did their worlds only touch by the slender, invisible thread of trade, leaving behind this one, solitary and utterly confusing piece of evidence? Scattered across the remote, fog-shrouded islands of the Aleutian chain, from the far reaches of Amchitka to the coast of the Alaska Peninsula, stand silent, crumbling sentinels of stone. These are not natural rock formations. They are the remains of ancient fortresses, known to archaeologists as ridgetop fortifications or Nunalleq, and they represent one of the most enduring martial mysteries in the ancient world. Their existence poses a haunting question. In a land of immense isolation, who was building such massive, sophisticated defenses, and what were they so afraid of? These are not simple walls. They are strategic masterpieces, constructed with immense effort. Built from countless basalt stones carried to the highest, most windswept ridges, these forts command sweeping, unobstructed views of the surrounding ocean and valleys. Their walls are thick and high, often featuring designated lookout points, narrow entryways that could be easily defended, and sometimes even tunnels or storage pits. The construction required a deep understanding of warfare and defense, a coordinated community effort, and a powerful, motivating fear. The sheer amount of labor involved is staggering, suggesting a society that felt its very survival was at stake. So, who built them? The prevailing theory points to the Nunalleq, or Aleut people, the indigenous inhabitants of the chain for thousands of years. Their oral histories sometimes reference periods of intense warfare, and these forts would be the physical proof of that violent era. But this answer only leads to more questions. The scale and number of the forts suggest a conflict far beyond sporadic raids or tribal skirmishes. This appears to have been a systemic, long-lasting, and terrifying state of war that defined life for generations. This brings us to the central, unsettling mystery. Who was the enemy? If the Nunalleq were fighting amongst themselves, the forts would likely be positioned to watch each other's territories. But many of these structures are placed to look outward, toward the open ocean, as if anticipating a threat from the sea. This has fueled a more controversial theory. Could the enemy have been someone else? Could it have been a different, now-vanished people? Some have pointed to vague oral traditions that speak of people with different eyes, or raiders from the west. This has led to speculation about prehistoric contact or conflict with other groups, perhaps from the Kamchatka Peninsula in Siberia. Another theory suggests the threat was not human at all, but environmental. A period of intense climate change could have put tremendous pressure on resources like seal and sea otter populations. As food became scarcer, competition between groups would have intensified into total war, driving communities to spend generations building impenetrable refuges on the hilltops. The enemy, in this case, was hunger and the fear of extinction. But the ocean-facing orientation of the forts keeps pulling the mystery back to the water. Were the Nunalleq defending their homes from an invading force that history has completely forgotten? A culture of seafarers who arrived, waged war, and then either retreated, were assimilated, or vanished without a trace, leaving no archaeological record beyond the defensive walls of their adversaries. The forts stand as silent and imposing as they were 1,000 years ago. They offer no easy answers, only a palpable sense of dread. They are a monument to a forgotten war, a long-lost existential threat that was terrifying enough to make entire communities climb to the top of the world and build walls of stone against the horizon, watching and waiting for an enemy that never came again, or was never seen from again. Long before the first European explorers set foot in Alaska, a catastrophe of unimaginable scale swept through the Yupik communities of the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. This event was so devastating it was seared into the collective memory of the people, passed down through generations in oral histories known as Kainrirak. They called it the Kali-Yarnar, or the Great Death. For centuries, it was understood as a profound historical tragedy. But modern archaeology has confirmed it, uncovering mass graves and entire villages wiped out. And this confirmation has revealed a deep historical puzzle. How did a massive pandemic, the kind that follows contact with the old world, ravage Alaska centuries before that contact ever officially occurred? The evidence from excavated sites is chilling. Archaeologists have uncovered communal graves holding dozens of individuals, buried hastily and simultaneously, a clear sign of a population collapsing too quickly to follow traditional funerary practices. The settlements were abandoned so suddenly that tools, artifacts, and even food were left behind, frozen in time. The scale of the disaster is evident. Some estimates suggest over half of the entire Yupik population may have perished. This was a society-altering event, a brush with near-total annihilation. The nature of the disease itself is the first mystery. The symptoms, as described in oral histories, are vague but horrifying. High fevers, bleeding, and rapid death. This points to a hemorrhagic fever, something akin to the plague or a particularly virulent strain of smallpox. But these were old-world diseases, carried by Europeans. Their arrival in the Americas after 1492 is well documented and caused similar devastation. So how could they have struck an isolated region of Alaska in the mid-17th century, over 100 years before regular, sustained contact with Russians began? This paradox has led to a fascinating and revolutionary theory, that the Great Death was indeed a result of European contact, but contact that was indirect and unintentional. The most plausible explanation involves the vast, ancient trade networks that connected the continents. We know that goods traveled from Siberia to Alaska across the Bering Strait for millennia. A disease, once introduced to Siberia by Russian fur traders in the early 1600s, could have hitched a ride across the ocean. It wouldn't have taken a Russian explorer. It could have been carried by a single infected Siberian trader visiting a coastal village. From that first point of contact, the virus would have spread like wildfire along indigenous trade routes, racing ahead of the explorers themselves. The Yupik people would have had zero immunity, making the disease exceptionally lethal. Another theory suggests a different source. Could it have been a particularly severe and unique outbreak of a native disease? Or could a pathogen have lain dormant in the Arctic environment for centuries, unleashed by a period of unusual warming? While possible, this seems less likely given the descriptions of the illness and the sheer scale of the mortality. The story of the Great Death is a tragic and sobering reminder that history is often more interconnected than it appears. It suggests that the wave of death that followed European expansion didn't always arrive with sailing ships and conquistadors. Sometimes, it traveled silently along ancient paths of commerce and communication, a ghost in the trade network. The Yupik people experienced the full, horrifying force of a global collision of worlds before they had even seen a European face. The Great Death stands as a silent, archaeological testament to that invisible first contact, a pandemic that arrived without a witness, leaving behind only stories of a great dying, and graves filled with the unanswered question of how it found them, so long before the rest of the world ever did. For the Tlingit people of the Pacific Northwest coast, history is held in the memories of the land and the stories of their ancestors. Among these oral histories exists a powerful and cryptic legend, the story of the Gooch La'at, often translated as the Iron People. This was not a name for Europeans, who would arrive much later with their iron tools and ships. This was a name for a specific, ancient Tlingit clan or group, renowned for their unique and powerful secret. They possessed the knowledge to work a strange, heavy metal that fell from the sky, long before such technology should have existed. The legend tells of a time immemorial when a brilliant fireball streaked across the heavens and crashed into the earth in the distant, rugged mountains of the Tlingit homeland. The people who discovered this celestial gift found it was not ordinary stone, but a lump of incredibly hard, malleable metal, iron. They learned, through generations of trial and error, how to heat and hammer this meteoric iron into tools and weapons. They crafted knives that held a sharper edge than any stone, adzes that could carve wood with unparalleled efficiency, and spear points and armor that bestowed a tremendous advantage in hunting and warfare. The possession of this sky metal made the Iron People powerful, respected, and perhaps feared by their neighbors. The mystery here is not just a story, but a question of archaeology. Is there any evidence to support this legend? The answer is a resounding and astonishing yes. In pre-contact Tlingit archaeological sites, researchers have indeed uncovered a small number of iron artifacts. A spear point, a knife blade, a few adze heads. Crucially, scientific analysis has confirmed this iron is not of European origin. Its chemical signature contains trace elements like nickel that are the definitive fingerprint of meteoric iron, metal that originated in the asteroid belt and fell to Earth as a meteorite. This confirmation transforms the legend from a myth into a historical account. The Tlingit oral history preserved a technological truth for centuries, maybe even millennia, but it also creates a new, compelling enigma. Where was the source? The legend points to a specific meteorite impact site, a place that would have been sacred and secret, known only to the Iron People. Yet today, that location is lost to history. No large, known iron meteorite exists within the traditional Tlingit territory. So, what happened to it? There are several theories. Perhaps the meteorite was not a single massive boulder, but a scattered field of smaller fragments, all of which were eventually gathered and used up over centuries by the skilled metalworkers. Once the last fragment was forged into a tool, the source was gone, existing only in memory and story. Another possibility is that the site was in a remote and unstable mountainous region. A landslide or glacier could have buried the meteorite entirely, sealing it away under tons of rock and ice, hiding it from future generations. The most intriguing theory involves the nature of the secret itself. The knowledge of working the sky metal would have been incredibly valuable, a form of power that was likely guarded fiercely by the clan that possessed it. The exact location of the meteorite would have been their most closely kept secret. It's possible that with social upheaval, warfare, or the devastating epidemics that swept through after European contact, the last custodians of this knowledge passed away without revealing the location, or the secret was lost in the chaos. The legend of the Iron People stands as a testament to an incredible, independent innovation. It proves that a pre-contact North American culture not only discovered metallurgy, but mastered it using a material from beyond our world. Their story is a powerful fusion of astronomy, technology, and oral history, leaving us to wonder if that legendary cache of star iron still lies hidden somewhere in the vast Alaskan wilderness, waiting to be found. In the sandy, permafrost-locked soil of the Cape Espenberg Peninsula, archaeologists excavating a 500-year-old Inupiaq house made a discovery that stopped them in their tracks. It wasn't a typical tool or a piece of jewelry. It was an object of war, but unlike anything anyone had ever seen before in the Arctic. A weapon so unique, it exists in a category of its own, a one-of-a-kind artifact that raises a profound question. What kind of conflict was happening here that required such a specialized and terrifying invention? The object is carved from a single, thick piece of sturdy driftwood. At its center is a handle, perfectly sized for a grip. But extending from this handle is not a blade, but a large, oblong plate, almost like a small shield. And mounted to the face of this wooden plate are 6 sharp, vicious points, each one made from polished walrus ivory, like long, deadly teeth. It is a hybrid object, both a defensive shield and an offensive weapon, a kind of portable, handheld fortification designed for close quarters, brutal combat. You could block a spear thrust with the wooden plate and immediately counterattack with a vicious swipe of the ivory spikes. The immediate mystery is its absolute uniqueness. Nothing like it has ever been found in any other archaeological site in Alaska or anywhere else in the Arctic. It is a complete outlier. If this was a standard weapon of war, we would expect to find more of them, or at least broken fragments in other sites from the same period. But we don't. This is the only one. So was it a prototype, the ingenious invention of a single warrior never widely adopted? Or was it created for a single, specific type of conflict that was itself a unique event? This leads to the central question. What was happening at Cape Espenberg 5 centuries ago that necessitated this? The period was likely one of social stress, a time archaeologists call the bow and arrow wars, where climate shifts may have put pressure on resources and increased competition between groups. But this weapon suggests something more intense than a raid. Its design implies face-to-face, hand-to-hand fighting of a particularly savage nature. It feels like a weapon designed for a last stand, for defending a doorway or a narrow passage. One theory is that it was created for a very specific, localized conflict. Perhaps the inhabitants of this one house were engaged in a long-running feud with a neighboring group, and this weapon was their custom-made solution to a specific tactical problem. Another, more chilling possibility is that it was designed for use inside the house itself, not for defense against outsiders, but for close-quartered violence within the community, a grim artifact of internal strife. There is also the possibility of ritual or ceremony. Could this object, for all its deadly appearance, have been more symbolic than practical? Was it part of a warrior's regalia, an object of intimidation and status, rather than a tool for the battlefield? This seems less likely given its sturdy, functional construction and the obvious wear on the handle suggesting use. The mystery of the shield weapon is amplified by the context of its discovery. It was found inside the house, left behind as if its owner intended to return for it, but they never did. The house was abandoned and the object was swallowed by the sand, preserving its secret for 500 years. It stands as a silent, brutal relic of a forgotten conflict. It forces us to reconsider the nature of warfare in the ancient Arctic, moving beyond simple raids to the potential for complex, terrifying, and personal violence. It is a single, dark data point suggesting a story we can scarcely imagine, a story of innovation born from desperation, and a conflict so intense it required a weapon the world had never seen before and has never seen since. Along the wind-battered coast near Nome, Alaska, the Earth itself seems to have swallowed its own secrets. Here, woven into the tundra and the permafrost, are a series of mysterious, narrow, tube-like tunnels. They are not made by animals and they don't resemble any known geological formation. The local Inuit people have known of them for generations and they have a name for them, the Alaskan Esophagus. The name itself evokes something organic, something that swallows and digests. And the question that has baffled geologists, archaeologists, and historians for decades is a simple one. Who or what made them? The tunnels are their own greatest mystery. They are perfectly round, stretching for yards through the solid earth, often with a consistency in diameter that seems too precise to be random. Their walls are sometimes smooth, almost glazed, as if subjected to intense heat. They burrow through the ground in ways that defy simple explanation, and perhaps most intriguingly, they are empty. No tools, no artifacts, no bones, no evidence of any kind has been found inside them to point to a creator. The mainstream geological explanation points to a rare and peculiar natural process. One theory suggests they are the result of cryoturbation, the churning and shifting of soil through cycles of freezing and thawing over centuries, which can sometimes create strange, tube-like structures. Another theory proposes that they are the casts of ancient tree roots. Thousands of years ago, the area might have been forested. When the trees died, their roots decayed, leaving hollow tunnels that were later filled with a different kind of sediment. Over millennia, the surrounding soil eroded away, leaving the harder, filled-in root casts protruding as strange, tubular formations. This is a known phenomenon, but local experts note that the Alaskan esophagus tunnels often don't match the typical pattern of root casts, appearing in places or with characteristics that don't quite fit the model. This is where the more speculative theories begin. If they are not entirely natural, could they be man-made? And if so, for what impossible purpose? Some suggest they are the remains of ancient, sophisticated ventilation systems for subterranean dwellings that have long since vanished, leaving only these intricate air shafts behind. Others propose they were used for storage, or even as escape tunnels between sod houses. The problem with this theory is the sheer difficulty of their construction. Digging such long, perfectly round, narrow tunnels through frozen Arctic ground with only bone and stone tools would be a monumental, almost unimaginable task. The most enigmatic theory connects them to the legendary tunnels of the Tlingit. In Inuit oral history, the Tlingit were a powerful people who inhabited the land before them, often described as being giants, incredibly strong, but who were eventually driven away. The stories say the Tlingit built strange structures and tunnels in the earth. Could the Alaskan Esophagus be the physical remains of these lost people? A literal underground testament to a culture that vanished, leaving only whispers behind. The truth remains buried. The tunnels are so mysterious because they defy easy categorization. They are either a spectacularly rare and poorly understood geological fluke, or they are evidence of a lost chapter of human history in the Arctic. They represent a limit of our knowledge. We can explain much of the ancient world, but some structures resist explanation. The Alaskan Esophagus tunnels are a blank space on the map of understanding, a question mark carved into the very earth, inviting us to wonder if we are truly seeing the hand of nature, or the faded, almost erased, fingerprints of a people whose world and ways are now completely lost to time. Along the wind-battered coast near Nome, Alaska, the earth itself seems to have swallowed its own secrets. Here, woven into the tundra and the permafrost, are a series of mysterious, narrow, tube-like tunnels. They are not made by animals, and they don't resemble any known geological formation. The local Inuit people have known of them for generations, and they have a name for them: the Alaskan Esophagus. The name itself evokes something organic, something that swallows and digests. And the question that has baffled geologists, archaeologists, and historians for decades is a simple one: who or what made them? The tunnels are their own greatest mystery. They are perfectly round, stretching for yards through the solid earth, often with a consistency in diameter that seems too precise to be random. Their walls are sometimes smooth, almost glazed, as if subjected to intense heat. They burrow through the ground in ways that defy simple explanation, and perhaps most intriguingly, they are empty. No tools, no artifacts, no bones, no evidence of any kind has been found inside them to point to a creator. The mainstream geological explanation points to a rare and peculiar natural process. One theory suggests they are the result of cryoturbation, the churning and shifting of soil through cycles of freezing and thawing over centuries, which can sometimes create strange, tube-like structures. Another theory proposes that they are the casts of ancient tree roots. Thousands of years ago, the area might have been forested. When the trees died, their roots decayed, leaving hollow tunnels that were later filled with a different kind of sediment. Over millennia, the surrounding soil eroded away, leaving the harder, filled-in root casts protruding as strange, tubular formations. This is a known phenomenon, but local experts note that the Alaskan Esophagus tunnels often don't match the typical pattern of root casts, appearing in places or with characteristics that don't quite fit the model. This is where the more speculative theories begin. If they are not entirely natural, could they be man-made? And if so, for what impossible purpose? Some suggest they are the remains of ancient, sophisticated ventilation systems for subterranean dwellings that have long since vanished, leaving only these intricate air shafts behind. Others propose they were used for storage, or even as escape tunnels between sod houses. The problem with this theory is the sheer difficulty of their construction. Digging such long, perfectly round, narrow tunnels through frozen Arctic ground with only bone and stone tools would be a monumental, almost unimaginable task. The most enigmatic theory connects them to the legendary tunnels of the Tlingit. In Inuit oral history, the Tlingit were a powerful people who inhabited the land before them, often described as being giants, incredibly strong, but who were eventually driven away. The stories say the Tlingit built strange structures and tunnels in the earth. Could the Alaskan Esophagus be the physical remains of these lost people? A literal underground testament to a culture that vanished, leaving only whispers behind. The truth remains buried. The tunnels are so mysterious because they defy easy categorization. They are either a spectacularly rare and poorly understood geological fluke, or they are evidence of a lost chapter of human history in the Arctic. They represent a limit of our knowledge. We can explain much of the ancient world, but some structures resist explanation. The Alaskan Esophagus tunnels are a blank space on the map of understanding, a question mark carved into the very earth, inviting us to wonder if we are truly seeing the hand of nature, or the faded, almost erased, fingerprints of a people whose world and ways are now completely lost to time. The past is filled with mysteries, some frozen beneath the ice, some buried deep within the land, and others hidden in legends passed down through generations. The stories we've explored today are only a glimpse into the strange, the unexplained, and the forgotten pieces of Alaska's history that continue to baffle researchers and spark endless debate. But the deeper we search, the more questions arise.